prophets is that they were often called to give hard messages, hard for them to deliver, hard to understand. And it must not have been easy to be an Old Testament prophet. Never mind the fact that they had to go naked and do all kinds of things crazy like that. Jeremiah was often called the weeping prophet for good reason. And today I actually feel like I'm standing in the shoes of those old prophets as I bring today a message, bear a message forward that is actually extremely hard for me to share, and I imagine will be hard for you to hear. About 3 weeks ago, something clicked in my soul. I'm calling it a moment of soul clarity. And I saw, beyond a shadow of a doubt, in my own heart, that it has come time for me to complete my long tenure here as lead pastor at Hillside Covenant Church. And can I believe I'm saying that out loud? I said it once in the first service, so I survived once. It's no easier to say it again. And so instead of doing a sermon on Isaiah, I thought I would spend some time talking out my heart to you about this, about how this has come about. Although I have figured out a way to get Isaiah into it just a little bit. So now I have some dry mouth today. Here's the first thing that I want to say. I want you to hear this more than almost anything else I say today, is that my love for Hillside, this family, has not diminished like one iota. Coot, you're killing me right now. My love for you has not diminished one iota. In fact, you are so part of my soul, part of Susan's life. Susan, by the way, can't be here today. She's up in Portland for my daughter's wedding shower. And you're so entwined in my heart that I just want you to know that no matter what happens from this moment on, I am forever and always the most enthusiastic and ardent Hillsider. And I know I'll always have welcome here. But if there's no diminishing of my love for this place, why am I making a decision to stop my leadership call here? And so it's that word leader that I want to talk about for a few minutes. And here's the thing about leadership. To be the leader of a church like this is the most immense and amazing privilege. It's also complex, and it's also a great weight that we bear gladly, though, through the years. But a good leader is always doing two things. A good leader is always looking inside and assessing their capacities. And they're always monitoring the needs and demands of the organization or church they're leading. And they're always calibrating those two. They're always looking inside and saying, do I have what it takes to give this beloved place what it needs? That's always what a good leader is doing. I was struck by Jesus' words in Luke. He's talking about discipleship here, but these words so struck me. I want to read them to you. Jesus said, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not first sit down and estimate the cost, to see whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid a foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule him, saying, 'This fellow began to build, but was not able to finish.' Or what king going out to wage war against another king will not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20? And if he can't, then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for terms of peace." And there's something wise in the teaching of Jesus about anything that we embrace to consider. Do we know the cost? Are we ready to pay it? So this is how I think about leaders. This is what I call the anatomy of a leader. When a leader takes on a role of leadership, they run by an engine deep inside of them. I call that the internal leadership engine. And like all engines, it runs on a fuel. And I think that fuel is made up of three things that combust together. They are an unshakable sense of calling, a passionate sense of conviction like will, and finally, a sufficient clarity. I think those three things come together to give a leader courage to be able to do whatever needs to be done, gives them the ability to be decisive and make good decisions, and gives them perseverance. I would say that for 20 years, and I've been here now just about 22 years, for 20 years, that engine in me has just hummed along like my lawnmower in my front yard. Just humming. And we've faced, haven't we, some amazing challenges through the years, and that has always been there. But it was about 2 years ago, after we had a tough season here that it was right in January of 2017 that I began to notice that little engine in me was starting to stutter, starting to miss a little bit. And I took notice of it, and I began to pay attention to it. And I spent time with my spiritual director and began to just pay attention. That's what a leader needs to do to that. We came into the summer that year, I don't know if you remember that, but our staff kind of had a little revival at the time. We began to re-envision some things about Hillside, and we got excited. And that little engine, as I sort of roared back to life that summer, we thought, hey, maybe we could do things different on a Sunday morning. It was the first inception of us moving from our 4 services to our 2, and different ways of being together. And so it seemed like all was well. I had sort of recovered from that little bit of sense of malaise. And then we entered into the fall of 2017. If some of you who were here remember, we started making some changes. And change is hard for an organization, for a system, for persons, for leaders. It's hard. And I noticed how quickly that tank just emptied again. Probably most memorable for me was it was a Sunday in September. We were at the 8 o'clock, and one of the issues on the table was closing down our beloved 8 o'clock service, which was a painful journey for us. And there was one morning that I tried to preach, and I couldn't start speaking without gagging. I actually had to stop preaching and go into the back for about 20 minutes because I couldn't even speak. I was taking some nasal medicine at the time, so I figured that's what it was. In retrospect, my body was kind of just crying out to me. You're trying to do something and you don't have the gas to do it. Came into the fall of 2018, so a year ago, and I was up in Washington for Christmas, and I wrote in my journal, this is going to be the year of honesty. I wrote in my journal. I'm going to face whatever this thing is. So I called it the year of honesty. That was right about the time that Jonathan Mueller, who just came into our circle, was helping us do some worship, became just a wonderful confidant. Because you can't really talk about this stuff in church, because it's about church. And suddenly there was this strange guy, John, outside, who was a pastor, who I could say, man, this is going on. And that helped me. Finally, came to council, and I was able to share what I was out with council. It was a moment. Keon was in the council meeting, and he looked at me across the table and said, it is your passion that's going to move us forward into the future. And I felt like a little bit of a fake right in that moment. That was the moment that broke for me. And I said, you know what? I'm empty, actually. So then we walked, Jack LaSalle, was the council chair, then we started walking together and dreaming and going, what is God saying in all of this? And we began to be open and dream, and that's when we began to envision, hey, let's maybe tackle this a different way. And we envisioned sharing the lead pastor load with my 2 amazing colleagues, Sarah and Jonathan, and we came to you with, hey, we're going to share the lead pastor. I'm going to pull back to 3/4 time. And we thought, hey, this is like a really good solution. I mean, I think we figured out a way to kind of be real and manage what's happening and continue to take care of us as a church. And we've lived into that ever since. And a lot of good things has been happening in the last year. But it was like someone actually gave me this analogy in between the services, and I wanted to share it with you. It's like if you were blindfolded and walking, on a plank, and so you're finding your way forward. Like, okay, this is good. This is going to work. This is good. And you're just always walking forward, and you come to a moment where you put your foot out, and it's just not there anymore. And about 3 weeks ago, I put my foot out, and I knew the plank had come to an end. There's no big vision from heaven. It's like one of those just deep knowings. You think about what we've come through for the last 2 years. We've undergone a lot of change as a church family, and I love you for it. A lot of churches are terrible when it comes to change. It just brings out what I call the ugly side of church. And what did we do? I mean, we took a 7-8 year pattern of 4 services, and we brought them down to 2 because we said, let's stop being 4 different congregations. Let's get together as an intergenerational family. Let's do this together. Right? And we opened up. Let's not rush through Sunday morning. So let's open up bridge time so we could just linger together. And that was good. And then we started emphasizing once again the importance of welcoming young families back into our church life. And we changed up this room, right? We had young and old on the stage, and got rid of the pews. Remember that meeting? That was it's one of the most beautiful, one of my greatest memories forever will be the congregational meeting where we discussed pews for a couple of hours. And it was, who was it? There was someone that, I think it was John Harrington who said, hey, I'll offer this coffee machine I have if we keep the pews. And then it was Dave Stewart who stood up and said, hey, I have a coffee machine too, and I'll give it to you if we change the pews. And there was a moment that we just laughed in the middle of that, and I go, that is beautiful. That's who we are. But we did that, and we were telling stories, and God at work was happening. We were saying, God's on the move here. God's at work. God's doing something. And that has continued. God is up to something here. And then right at that junction, this sense of excitement, God's doing something, this leadership engine goes quiet for me. And I was thinking, like, what does that mean? And here's what I realized, is I realized that this junction that we've come to is not the destination that we've been headed at all. Actually, these last 2 years, you know what we've been doing? We opened up the garage door, we changed the tires, we changed the oil, we've been giving that car some tune-up, we pulled it out of the garage, we packed some stuff in the trunk, we washed the car, we go, man, we're getting this car ready to go somewhere. Can you hear it? I mean, the engine's rolling, and we feel like God's on the move, and the road is right before us, and it's open and wide, but it goes around the bend, and I can't see around the bend. I had this thought, man, I think I'm like Moses. I've had the privilege of walking with us for so long. Not that we've at all been in a desert, but we've walked a long time, and we've come to the Jordan, and it's time to cross the Jordan into whatever next season is happening, and I'm not supposed to keep going. Joshua, whatever Joshua means, takes over. Of course, Moses had to go run a mountain and die, and the good news is I'm healthy, so praise God for that. And the second thing is that Moses didn't get across because he had disobeyed God. And certainly I've disobeyed God plenty in these years, but that's not what's at stake here at all. And then I was thinking, man, it's like David who wanted to build a temple for the Lord. Do you remember this story? And so he gathers the temple materials, and he gathers them all together, but then God says, well, you know what? You're not going to build the temple. Your son Solomon is. And these stories have helped me think that, yeah, you know what, in God's story, there's a time for leaders to come into a place and give who they are. In fact, leadership theory says this, that all organizations are living and breathing and changing all the time. And leaders come with a specific set of gifts and aptitude. And the beautiful thing is when that need of a church and that leader, they just fit together so well, which has been our story. But it doesn't always last forever, because as that changes, maybe there's now a new need, a new kind of vision, a new kind of leadership that's going to be called into action, which means God stilling my leadership engine actually is a prelude and a promise to us that we're on the cusp of something important and good, and God's graciously preparing me and you for it. And if there's anything that I want you to hear today, I want you to hear that. That God is in this, here's the thing. Can we all, with enthusiasm right now, affirm that Jesus Christ is the unrivaled Lord of this church?
Amen.
I get chills when I hear you say that, with that kind of energy. This is his church. Not that any of you would ever think this, but this is absolutely not the church of Jeff. And if for any of us it is, then we're ill. And as we've been reading in the prophets, God would need to do some gentle correction to that, because he says, don't trust persons, don't trust personalities. And sometimes as evangelicals, we're a little prone to link our loyalty to personalities rather than a community. And it's not to say that my leaving doesn't leave a hole, because love always leaves a hole, because we love greatly. But holes are meant to be filled with surprises and wonders and good things which God has in store for us. So I promised I would get Isaiah into my message. I was reading through, and we came to Isaiah 10, and there was this passage that leapt out at me, like just with the force of the acts that it speaks about. This is Isaiah 10, verse 15. It says this: shall the axe taunt itself over the one who wields it, or the saw magnify itself against the one who handles it? As if a rod should raise the one who lifts it up, or as if a staff should lift the one who is not around, who is not wood. It's this beautiful way of saying, don't ever forget who the actor is and who the tool is. That God is the champion of this place. He loves this place. He's been faithful to this place. And he brings his servants to serve, to come, and to go. For 73 years we've been here. And the stability of the church is not in its pastors, it's in its people. I don't know if I was just thinking, Raleigh and Hermione, I don't know if they're in the room, or Paul and Esther Allen, Dorothy and Ed Barr, some of our saints that have been, Brad and Jane. I was just looking out and seeing so many of you who have been here so long, and I've seen so many pastors come and go. And Lon Allison, one of our older pastors, beloved pastor, once said, Hillside's like a mighty ocean-faring ship that just keeps moving through, and leaders come and they're trained and they grow up, and then they're sent out again. And I've seen that happen, and now I get to ask your blessing to be one of those people, to be sent out. I came here as a little mullet-haired worship pastor, hardly knowing what I was doing. And man, I've grown up here. Grown to understand what it means to be a pastor in this place, with you teaching me, and me teaching you, and us figuring that out together. And now I get to take all of that somewhere. So you might be saying, what's up? Well, here's the craziest thing of all. There's nothing up. Like I don't have a call. I'm not going to another church. I don't have another ministry. God's only given me a tiny bit of light, and he says, the end of the plank happened. Have integrity. Say it. Name it. Step your foot into the Jordan, because the Jordan didn't stop flowing until they actually stepped into it. So I've stepped into the Jordan. Today I'm just getting splashed with Jordan all over me. Because here's the moment. And what we are going to do is we're going to go up to Washington. We have a little place up there. And we're going to stage ourselves for a season of discernment. We're going to say, God, okay, here we are. What would you like, Pastor? So I'm 55, which means, I can't retire for another 10 years. So this is not retirement yet. This is, I don't actually know what this is. I ask you to pray with me on what this is. But you know what? I know it's right. I know it. Susan and I actually thought this last season was going to last longer. This really wasn't a ruse, all this stuff, just to get to this place. This has caught us, actually, even our own discerning, by a little bit of surprise. So we too are grieving. But here's our plan. We're thinking that we were going to go up for the summer already, because we're working 3/4 time. I reserved some time away this summer at my daughter's wedding. which is at the end of May. And so that still seems like the right time for us. And so we plan to be here for the next 2.5 months and just relish being family and beginning to live into this beginning of a transition. And then near the end of May, then we're gonna head up to Washington, and then we're gonna just kind of see what happens next. Claudia, leading our council, has been absolutely amazing. And every time, I tell you what, every time somebody becomes the chair of council and something like this happens, first thing I want to do is just apologize profusely. because they never sign up. This is going to be a real peaceful season. Come on, council. We were laughing. We said we should have had a warning because Will Davidson is on the council again, and this always happens when Will Davidson. But the council they are beautifully strong, committed people, and your staff. What amazing staff we have. Amen? Amen? Amen. So we're in good hands. But even beyond council and staff, we have Jesus, who's the Lord of this place. Who loves this place more than any of us could ever do, right? So we're okay. I'm good. I'm just crazy sad, but it's like, how Christians can both be sad and joyful at the same time? Mm-hmm. It's kind of one of our unique things because we're a resurrection people. So that's going to be the way it is for these months. I'm going to close with this. As sometimes we get older, God leads us in gentler ways. When I was younger and when I came to Hillside, I needed a very direct sign, and God gave me one. If you ever want to hear this story, I'll tell it to you. I had a very dramatic it was clear as day because I got a miracle sign. I love those, but they take away kind of a little bit of faith. But when God speaks to you quietly, He says, trust me. And you follow that still voice is similar to what happened to the great prophet Elijah near the end of his ministry. He was tired. And he went to Mount Sinai to listen to God, and God didn't show up in a fire and an earthquake and a big wind. He showed up in a stillness, it says. And then God told him to begin to pass on his mantle. So there's been a stillness that I've trusted. And it's a stronger knowing than probably if I had heard 5 mourning doves coo in a row. Is that a sign? Because I'm into birds making signs and that's But I will tell you this did happen. You know how we've been reading Hosea and Isaiah and how they had children and God told them to have children and would name them something as a sign to the community? So Hosea had 3 children, chapter 1. Anybody remember this? This is like a checkup on our reading. Jezreel, Lohuama, something like that, and Lo-Ami, 3 children. Those names meant something in Hebrew for them. It happened again this week as we read Isaiah. Chapter 10 or so, he has a son called Maher-shalal-Amaz. Which means, quick as the booty, speedy as the prey, whatever that means. And I was thinking, wow, that's really interesting, God, that you use the children of the prophets to be a sign to the community. So can I tell you something? I think my daughter is the sign for me, at least, and Susan. Here's what I mean by that, is that when we came and candidated here in November 1996, Susan was pregnant with Randy. And she was born February 16th, 22 years ago, and then we started here April 15th, tax day. In 1997, that was 22 years ago. She's getting married. On May 26th, which means that my daughter carries as a sign in her birth to her marriage the season of the life that we were given to love each other. And I was thinking, that is so beautiful. I'm going to see her forever going forward like a warming oven. She's going to keep the food of our love warm for the rest of my life. I don't know if you think that's weird. It's just so poetic to me. So, thank you for listening to my heart. The last thing I like to do is disappoint anybody. So talking like this to all of you beloved people is pretty much the last thing I'd ever want to do. But when God says go, guess what? We sing. So I'd like to pray. Jesus, I just want to thank you so much how much you love us, me, my family, this family. You know every story. Not one of us is more important than another person. Every one of us matters. You're working all things for good. And I know that you do this. When you work something out in one person's life, there's you working on the other side of the equation as well. I believe with all my heart that you have good stored up for this beautiful place. There is a season of flourishing and life about to open up. And I so believe that you are making that happen even in the same moment as you're asking me, permitting me to step away into whatever that is you will call me to as well. And all of us together, we're just going to say, we trust your love for us. We commit ourselves to you, Jesus Christ, Lord of the church, risen, seated at the right hand of God. You who are moving things toward the renewal of everything. And we get to be part of that here, wherever I go. And I think for this truth that we're family forever. That the bonds that have been built in this place, they're good for life. And that immense, unerasable grace, I am so grateful for. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
So, look who's sitting to my right. This is Kelly Ballard. Kelly Ballard was the worship pastor at Hillside before I was. And in the intersection of our lives, he has